welcome to Otaku Podcast. Welcome, one and all. I am your senpai. That's right, I'm your senpai. I am aka Senpai Zane. Welcome to today's episode. As always, I am joined by my fantastic co-host, Mr. Susude.
Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening.
Today, first off, I want to say we've hit 1,000 downloads of our episodes. I know. So I wanted to say thank you so much for those who have been listening. Thank you for those who had been listening from the get-go, back in its original form of Otaku First. But just like Frieza, we have changed.
Ascended. We've reached a higher form.
Of brain power.
Less gold, though.
Yeah, less gold. But
unless the viewers want golds, then we'll give them golds.
Imagine if we did an episode where you look like Red Hot Chili Pepper from JoJo, and I look like Golden Frieza.
Absolutely.
What a cosplay!
I'm just gonna find a filter for it now.
So yes, thank you for those who have subscribed, liked. If this is your first time watching one of our videos or listening, do like everyone else. Like, share, subscribe. You can catch us on YouTube if you're not already subbed. Relevant links will be in the description down below. Today's session, today's conversation point, I should say, was from your brilliant mind. Actually, I'll let you explain this one.
So, what I thought would be a fun talking point, not going into too much detail, just the bare bones of it, is I wanted to talk about whether you, Senpai Zane, feel that Western animation is starting to capture some of the same magic that Eastern animation, like anime and the like, has been capturing for many years now.
Yeah.
Because there's been an advent of absolutely phenomenal Western like cartoons in recent years. And, figured it would be a good talking point, to be fair.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got some examples. I've drawn up a list of what I think are, Western cartoons that have been influenced by anime. If I've missed any, make sure to drop in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you guys, so please let us know. But yes, I know exactly what you mean. So first one on the list, believe it or not, is Voltron. Now, Voltron is probably stems back not only to the original anime, of course, but we've also got it's a kinship from Korra, if you understand where I'm going with this. Similar art style and character designs.
Absolutely.
But this, with this incarnation of Voltron, again, popular on Netflix. I think it was only distributed on Netflix. I don't think it was
only on Netflix. Yeah, it was a straight to Netflix show. So.
A combination of CGI and, of course, beloved mechs.
Gotta love some mechs.
Mech action, but also it's Western. It's not a Japanese studio. It's from the US, again inspired by the anime.
Yeah. I think Voltron's a quite an interesting one because it's very specifically an anime title that was brought to the West to appeal to a Western audience.
Yes.
And I think that probably out of many of the things that we might discuss today, probably sets it apart in a way from other titles because it's specifically an adaptation of an anime, which I think kind of sets it in its own category in a lot of ways. And I mean, say what like people will say what they will
Hmm.
about the most recent Voltron
Hmm.
adaptation, but it's got a lot of merits.
Yeah.
And while the original is not something that I'm well versed in,
Hmm.
based on the small amounts I have seen of it, it seems to be pretty true to form in the ways that are important.
Yeah.
So it captures the key elements that make the anime good.
Yeah. I think Voltron is one end of the scale. Like like you say, I think it's a complete adaptation of an anime by a Western studio and such. And then at the other end of that scale, which is probably where we're going to head more towards, is things like your Avatar: The Last Airbender, Castlevania, which of course recently came out, and then we've got some anomalies in between that with things like the recent Yasuke anime, which is, of course, written and directed in the US, but of course produced by Mappa, which is a Japanese studio.
When worlds collide.
Exactly, yeah. Um, so yeah, it's as as I say, it's probably one end of the scale compared to the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, moving on to other shows, I don't know if it might be better to list a number of shows and then talk about them rather
Mm.
than going on one by one. Um, I mean, other examples that come to my mind, we obviously had the Dragon's Dogma animation.
Mm.
Also on Netflix, you'll notice a pattern. There's a lot of Netflix presence here. You got things like Dragon's Dogma. You got Dota.
Mm.
Um,
Blood,
obviously, yeah,
yeah, Blood of Zeus. I was just going to say.
Blood of Zeus, yeah, Castlevania,
Hmm.
um, both Avatar series, the Dragon Prince.
Yes.
Um, try and think if there's another one in there. I'm pretty sure there is, but I can't think of it off the top of my head for some reason.
I was going to say the most recent version of Thundercats. Uh,
Thundercats, of course.
uh, of course, there was a more, I want to say 2009 version of He Man, but of course, we're getting the new version of He Man as well, which is done by Powerhouse Studios, which, of course, did Castlevania and Blood of Zeus. So,
Yeah.
yeah, again,
I
it's
suppose
going
on
to.
even on the same level as He-Man, we obviously had an adaptation of She-Ra as well,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Princess of Power. So there's a whole plethora of like shows out there that are I think are trying to appeal to the sorts of people who are watching anime, enjoying those stories, even to the extent of like powerhouses like Ghibli and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that I think that there needs to be a very distinct divide between these sorts of animations and then your properties by things like Marvel and DC, because I think that they themselves are very distinctly set apart. They are
Hmm.
very Western. They're a very Westernized like kind of concept.
Yeah, they. That's very true. I think. It sometimes it sometimes the line blurs between the style of animation as well as the storytelling.
Yeah,
Where with again something like um, Avatar: The Last Airbender, it was episodic. It was unlike most Western cartoons at the time, where they were kind of like, let's say, for example, Inspector Gadget. It's a villain of the week. It doesn't really progress or go anywhere. But with Avatar: The Last Airbender, it had a start and a finish. It was a complete
fully
journey.
fleshed out character arcs,
Mm,
complex like villain antagonists. There were redemption stories. There were like irredeemable characters. There were characters you were meant to hate,
mm.
but you somehow still love them anyway. And like there was also like there was a very gradual power climb as well with
Yes.
occasional spikes, whereas like with a cartoon like you were suggesting just then, like Inspector Gadget or something like that. Every single episode, there is the baddie,
Yeah.
and there is the way that person, the hero wins.
Yeah, and then that's
Uh,
it. That's
and
your episode.
and that's generically, I think, the way that a lot of Western storytelling has been done. There's a bad guy, there's a good guy. Good guy, even if it seems bleaker for a time, the good guy will always win, and that's, I think, until maybe the last decade or so, is how all kind of Western comic book storytelling has been. It's kind of been, you know, Superman, he's the hero, everyone loves him. Lex Luthor, he's the bad guy. He
Yeah.
might look like he's winning, but doesn't matter what color of kryptonite you throw at that Superman. He's gonna find a way to succeed in the end because he's the hero, and that's how it works.
Absolutely, yeah. I see what you mean with some of the older cartoons like the Superman one. I think again, comparing in the same sort of dimension, you look at something like the original Teen Titans, very influenced by sort of anime, in the sense that again the season had an arc. So again, the first season, for example, I always remember Robin's sort of change into Red X or Slade's
Yeah,
sidekick, which was incredible. Um, so yeah, again, it's that kind of progressive journey, but also still doing the villain of the week sort of style that we're
absolutely.
used to in the West.
And you're right, that is where I think that probably actually one of the earliest times where I started to actually kind of recall a like an overarching kind of plot that continues per the show.
Mm-hmm.
You've still got your same, like you say, villain of the week thing going on, but there's something a little bit more, and you get like a little piece of it every now and then, and you're left. And it's kind of clever in a way, 'cause it's kind of in the sort of way that video games tell stories these days, in that you'll get like a tiny fragment of something, and there's more if you are willing to seek it out.
Yeah,
But if you're not, you're still getting your kind of villain of the week. Kind of, you're still getting to knock the bad guy about. You know?
yeah, exactly. You still have to do your side quests. Um, with so yeah, it is a crazy sort of thing. I think another aspect of it as well is that for a lot of people that are our sort of age group are now in the industry, and where they have been influenced by something like Dragon Ball Z or Cardcaptor Sakura, they can now use that inspiration in their own works.
Absolutely, and I think that that's a very good point to make. Is that, and it does go to show that the industry is very diverse. It's trying to get more diverse through
Mm,
the people that are coming into it. Um, and there are a lot of influences that we have. I think that in the past, when cartoons were made, especially, yeah, this is actually universal. Like,
mm,
there are always these like kind of like societal trends that are going on, and I think that in the previous generation
mm-hmm.
there was a lot more about life that was a bit more black and white. But
Yeah.
now we're kind of like we're living in this like generation where there's so much more grey
Mm-hmm.
in it, and I think that's what makes good storytelling, is that there's kind of like, you can have your hero
Yeah.
and they can come out and be this righteous amazing character, but
Mm,
to have a character like that and not have any complexity, any like kind of darkness in them,
yeah.
is kind of it's boring. And that's why I think that's why people really relate and like Zuko as a character in
Mm-hmm.
Avatar: Last Airbender, because he's made out to be the bad guy, and he plays that role quite badly,
Yeah.
albeit for a long time. But you start to see him start to struggle with what the Fire Nation's doing and what's expected of him, and you realize that the reason that he's doing all these terrible things is because he's just trying to get his honor back. He's trying to seem like he's trying to make his dad proud.
Yeah, yeah, and he kind of understands his sort of role in the larger picture, which is a great sort of
Mm.
character moment. I think you're onto something there, where again the grey is always, not always, but the grey seems to be more attractive to the audience you look at the Lancer character types like Vegeta, and again his whole sort of character journey. Everyone's drawn into it and such. And again, that translates into sort of Western stuff like Zuko's journey. I'm trying to think of another example. I think I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
Well,
But
I'm like even like think about like if we go into some not more recent animes, but you go into like titles like Naruto and
Mhm,
characters like Sasuke and
mhm.
Gaara, like characters who are there's nothing really like clear about them. They
Yeah.
seem like they're bad people.
Mhm.
Like Sasuke obviously leaning more on the good. Gaara was portrayed in initial like as more of a bad guy,
Yeah.
but then you realize that there's actually so much more that is complex about them. There's like they've got these motivations for why they do these crappy things that they do.
Mm. Yeah. There's another sort of thing I've just thought of is the sort of generational aspect as well. Um, is it something that we see a lot in? Probably not as much, but I was just thinking of again. Take Naruto for example. We're getting the sort of Baruto, the introduction of a younger generation and such. I do wonder if we'll get to see something similar. I know you could say Young Justice did something in a similar vein, where it went from your original heroes, and then we got a time skip, which of course we know is so ingrained with animes. But then we start to see a lot more of the younger sort of Robins and Batgirls and stuff coming
Yeah,
through.
you see the characters that you've grown to know and love. They're no longer the ones who are learning; they're the mentors, and they're
Yeah.
kind of like teaching all the lessons that they had to work out the hard way,
Mm.
and having their own struggles as a result. And whereas, like, I think that, I mean, in terms of comic books, I think that Western comics have always been big on generations.
Yeah.
Like, there's always, but I don't think that that's ever really portrayed well in the animations because I think that whereas comic book adaptations come about, the studios that make them,
Hmm.
there it's a very clear we want to do cover this part of the story, and that's it. We're going to give you this many episodes, and we want you to do this.
Hmm.
Whereas now, I think, like you said before, like studios, I think are getting more comfortable with the idea of you can tell a short story,
Yeah.
but then you have you can start sowing the seeds of a much larger plot all throughout. And I think that like you with mentioned Young Justice,
Yeah.
and like it started off like very clear cut, like villain of the week kind of thing, but every single episode they were like kind of leaving these like seeds of intrigue about what this big overarching like plot is, like what's this villain league and like
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
Lex Luthor doing, what's Lex Luthor's purpose for the Superboy, all that
Mm.
sort of like stuff.
Yeah, and Cadmus and the whole sort of journey.
Yeah.
And again, you still have the character development moments. You know, Robin realizing he's not meant to be the leader. Well, not straight away, and having Aqualad or Calden. Um,
My mind is
that's
going completely black at the moment.
but he became the leader. Again, some great character journeys and stuff. Um, in terms of like anime tropes, do you think we see a lot of those nowadays, or do you think it's still touch and go?
I think that we are starting to see more of that in some titles. Funnily enough, none come to my head immediately. Especially, I can't even think of tropes, but I have an awareness
Mm,
of it becoming more prevalent, and I think that's what. And I think because it's happening so gradually, I think that's what's been so good about it.
yeah.
And I think no one's. I think that there are a lot of people out there who are like massive traditionalists who would watch every single like Batman series, but
Mm,
they would shun any sort of anime title. But the way that it's so gradually being done with this like generational shift,
yeah.
I think that a lot of people who wouldn't have considered it in the past
Hmm.
are now starting to open their eyes to it. And also, we have to take into consideration the fact that for the longest time, at least when we were a lot younger and the generation before, things like watching anime, reading manga, those things would typically, even though it's the exact same thing as like reading comics and all that sort of thing, those are the sorts of things that like people you told people you do that and they're like, oh, why are you doing that? Or like that's so weird that you read that. It's like it's backwards. It's like you know what I mean? It's like kind of
Yeah.
like it feels like just generally societally people have just become more accepting of different media from different countries, and I think you see that especially in even in like movies now. Like obviously Parasite won is it Parasite? Yeah,
Yes.
won like an Oscar,
Yeah.
and
Best Picture.
and it was like it was a completely subtitled movie, like a
Mhm.
Korean masterpiece, and people are starting to become more open to the idea that if you give stories like that a chance, if you give media from places that wouldn't do something, I think that that's all stuff that's starting to trickle down into the cartoons that we watch, the like comics we read, books, even just
Yeah.
like normal like live action television.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I no, I understand where you're coming from. It's it, it almost branches out into different things. Like I always distinctly remember, and I think you may have seen these. There's like these short animation stories, Star Wars stories on YouTube. They're like
That Forces of
six.
Destiny.
They're like 60 seconds long, and they're kind of like backstories for each character. So you kind of like get a backstory on Anakin and Luke, but they're really short. And the point I'm trying to say is that the animation style is so anime-esque because it's like fast pacing, and it would be for 60 seconds, but it is so clean and so fast and stuff. It is gorgeous to watch, and you're like, oh my god, if I had, if
I had a
Disney,
show of like
yeah.
23 minutes of this, including credits.
I need a hyper opening sequence, and there's even cuts. People have made them into AMVs, where they
I know the
match.
one you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the one the one that you see all the time over social media, which is showing the journey of Anakin
Yeah.
through his whole life to becoming Vader.
But with like a Naruto opening song, like
Yeah,
prepared behind
oh,
it.
absolutely fantastic.
They're amazing. But those are short adverts, and again, you can feel the effect and the animation style because of those. So again, it's absolutely fantastic. There was something else I was going to touch on. Korean, yes. So I know you didn't really want to talk about studios, but I have to
Go
mention
ahead,
this.
by all means.
So I don't know if you know. I watched I only learned this like last week because I watched a video about it on YouTube. But when it came to Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original studio that did the animation for Nickelodeon, it splintered off and created another studio called Studio Mir,
Oh yeah,
MIR. Now, Studio Mir, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, um, they have a US office, but they also have a Korean office.
all right.
And when it came to Korra, half the animation is done in the US and the other half is done in Korea. Um, they did similar things with um, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Again, they had some scenes and such was done in Korea and then sent back. But again, I don't want to say a majority, but again, a lot more of the workload was sent to Korea, and I wonder if that's why we're feeling so much of that sort of animation style, that sort of because we've all seen, God of High School now on Crunchyroll. We know the
Yes.
extent their animation can go. Like, if they want to go all in on it, they can do. So I think this is again a sort of shift of the effects that we feel from that side of the world, really.
Maybe, yeah. I think that it's becoming a lot easier for studios to collaborate. And I was just like, look, you mentioned that studio, and I was just having a look at their works, and I can see, like you said, for Korra, they did like episodes 1 to 12, and then they did the odd 1 or 2 episodes here and there throughout the rest of the book. They also did the same. They also did animation services for Young Justice Outsiders and all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, no, I definitely get the point you're making there. With a lot more collaboration being possible now because of how freely we can, share works via the internet and
Yeah.
data transfer. It's a lot easier for big like studios in the East to get involved in Western projects and vice versa. And we've got a lot's got a lot's got to be said about that because it's a great way of collaborating, a great way of sharing techniques that
Yeah.
you may not have in your own studios. And
Yeah.
I know that a lot of studios do that. They're like, and I can't think what it was, but I know that there are studios out there in the East anyway who have been like, okay, well, we have this one studio doing this whole whole series. However, we want to get Mappa in to do this one fight scene. Like they will come in and they will do this fight scene for us, and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, they'll pay for a small team at Mappa to animate this part for us, which is again, like you say, it's a great sort of idea of collaboration and such. And again, I think another aspect. I know we're kind of talking more about the anime and such, but another aspect is the voice acting, because again, like you say, the fluidity of talking to that other side of the world in such an easier manner now with the use of the internet. Voice acting aspects have helped massively. So we don't have like filler words like "believe it" or "you know."
Yeah, I think like a lot more work's been put in by voice actors who are gonna dub to learn the best ways to actually translate those words to the character and how they move the voice. And obviously, that's not just to say that it's the voice actors; it's obviously the voice directors as well.
Yeah.
There are all these positions now in that field, which is taken so much more seriously now than it was in the past. Like um, you see for like AAA like video games now, you see the amount of time and effort they invest in their voice actors now. Like you
Yeah.
watch anything about any documentary about like God of War or like The Last of Us, and you'll see these like mocap recordings, and you'll see like these genuine tears being shed. And so it's a bit crazy to be honest. Like
Yeah.
how much more their effort they're putting into being faithful to these characters.
Yeah. It's almost it's well, I say it's almost it is pretty much a full gig, isn't it? The only difference is that there's no costumes or set design. It's ping pong suits, and I think I watched a video based on Resident Evil 8's Village, the mocapping in that, and again, it's the actors and
Full-time job
actresses.
now, really, really high demand. Like, and for the most part now, it's like that. It's not a situation of you have a mocap actor and you have the voice actor. They're usually the same person now
Yeah,
because they've realized that if you have the person who's doing the voice do the action as well, you're probably going to get a much more faithful to life like rendition of it.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, Getting back on track. It's other sort of cartoons. Wow, not only has there been series, but animated movies as well. So of course we've had numerous DC animated movies, which again, I would say you could probably feel the effects of OVAs and such being influenced.
Absolutely.
I think so. And again, kind of, let's say for example the Naruto movies where they feel like they have a lot more budget compared to like a standard episode. They
Yeah.
feel like you can get a similar sort of aspect when it came to some of the animated movies. I know Marvel did a couple which completely CGI'd sort of animated movies, which is again interesting in terms of where they were going with that.
Absolutely. Justice League, Dark, all of those.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss. Like I was honestly blown away by those movies, and I came out of them feeling the same way I did about any anime movie that I watched. And
Yeah.
maybe now it's less a matter, and this changes the whole dynamic of the conversation entirely. But maybe it's less about whether Western animation is now starting to capture the same sort of magic, same sort of feel as Eastern animation, and maybe more of it, are they coming to meet in the middle? Because I'm obviously talking about how is Eastern like anime influencing like things like big DC comics and their animations, but you see there's a lot of references these days to Western titles in anime now. Like I think My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, they're ones that come to mind as being the characters were making mention of things happening or things in Western media.
Yeah.
That they'll make references to characters. They'll have cameo characters, like showing that it might not be necessarily that character as seen in the West, but you know as a reader and a watcher, you know exactly who that character is or meant to represent.
As like an analog sort of
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's it always makes me laugh with Jujutsu Kaisen, the way they just talk about Jennifer Lawrence. Like it really threw me off, but I was like, that's amazing. Like it's something we could all relate to here. Um but yeah, it's I see where you're going, and I guess in the same way, like not so much Demon Slayer, but it is almost held compared to movies like Your Name and Studio Ghibli movies and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
So
now we're kind of, I think we're towing the line between both kind of aspects, kind of reaching this kind of real peak where studios are putting the right kinds of talent behind projects, they're putting the right kinds of money, they're not rushing the people working on it, and we're ending up like in the past, if you were to say, and it's still to an extent with maybe some of their like live action stuff, if you told me that, oh, like if you want to watch this like really amazing animation, go onto Netflix and they produced a Castlevania series. If you had told me that would be amazing, I probably would have not given it a second thought. And I think to some degree I did. I was quite late on the train to the Castlevania, and I think that was largely because Netflix has had a quite a series of blunders with titles, like things like Death Note and stuff like that.
Yeah, they've been very touch and go when it
Yeah, it's
comes
like you
to
get a good one
certain.
or you get a bad one, don't you? And
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely. I just thought of another reference, which was Gun Gale Online, where in one episode they there was the Expendables, uh, which blew my mind. I absolutely love that. So again, references to the West, but as you were saying, Netflix is interesting, and I know Amazon's been a weird beast about animation as well. In terms of course, we've recently had Invincible, again a Western style animation, has a whole character arc and journey from start to finish. It's not, villain of the week and stuff. Where was I going with this? It has a great sort of finisher in the sense that, like, I don't want to say like most animes, like more recent animes like your My Heroes and Attack on Titan, where it leaves it on a slight cliffhanger where it leaves you, well, what do we get from the next series? That's been really interesting. The part it kind of fell apart for me is the animation itself. There's some really great parts, but there's also some really down parts. But again, I know it was made during a pandemic, so you can't expect it to have the royal treatment and such. It was bound to be budget cut.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely understand that as well. It's kind of got to put the work where the work needs to go.
Yeah,
I think that's where like anime a lot of the time gets a lot of bad rep in that, like, you'll have these series that have like amazing animation, and then you'll have like a single episode where the animation just isn't right. There's just something about it that's not good.
I instantly think of Dragon Ball Super, where Goku has that fight against Beerus and is just a mess.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know, bless them, they only had like 2 weeks to put that episode together and whatnot, and I know they kind of clean it up when it came to the DVD and the Blu-ray release, but it is a mess to watch. Sorry, just can think of the memes. But then when like you said, when it came to like the big fights, the fights that matter, like against Durin, oh my god, it was a spectacle. Like, that's where the budget goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we might have actually found that all of the budget for Dragon Ball Super actually went into the Dragon Ball Super movie with those big old CGI moments.
Oh yeah, and they're clean CGI moments as well. They're not jarring. They don't take you out of it. I'm talking like no one else has seen this movie, but it is amazing. Those sequences are fantastic.
Rolly.
And again, you could even say, I know we're kind of tailing off a little bit here, but when it came to things like Jujutsu Kaisen, whose animation is, I would say, a high consistency throughout, I don't think there's a moment where it really drops the ball.
No, not at all. It's but I think that's the stamp that Mappa has now got to put on all of its works. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of done all these favors for itself, but it's also kind of set the bar for itself so high that there is they could make they could make like 30 seconds of bad animation and they would get nothing but like internet abuse.
Yeah, you think back to the final season of Attack on Titan where they kind of leaned a little bit more into the CGI and no one was happy about it. Yeah, you're right. And you're right in that regard. And that was only for like 1 or 2 episodes. Yeah, it's Mappa is king regardless, I think. But then we could flip that and say, will Western studios learn from that mistake in terms of, you look at you'll sort of, I think they're called Man of Action. Ooh, there you are, you're back. You look at Man of Action properties that was responsible for some of the Jackie Chan Adventures, the Avengers Assemble cartoon series.
Ultimate Spider-Man, I guess, to some degree.
Yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, it would have been Ultimate Spider-Man.
And the Web Warriors sort of spin-off as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll kind of take a leaf out of that book and kind of, make sure that their animation is a consistency that they can deliver. I'm not too worried about studios behind Castlevania because they just make it all at once and then release it as a batch. They're not doing it a week on week.
Episodic, yeah. It's kind of you make your whole title and you're done.
You make the whole cake. You're not making cupcakes.
Yeah, you're making the entire batch, and I think that's I think as cartoons become more acceptable viewing for adults,
Mm-hmm.
more and more time and money will be invested in it. I think that's actually probably what sets the East apart from the West. Is that in the East, at least from my point of view, it's been like anime and manga is like a massive part of the culture to some degree, and it's a lot more socially accepted that it's something that an adult could enjoy. Whereas over here, for the longest time, it has been like cartoons for kids, comics are for kids. Like adults don't read those things and stuff. But I think that it's becoming more and more socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And as a result, studios are obviously, because of capitalism, gonna cash in. You know, you're gonna invest in a good story for your animation because you're not just pandering to, like, you're not just making a show for children who are not gonna be. They're not in it for the long arcing story. They're in it for to see their like favorite superhero like save the day.
Yeah, it's and like we are getting more sort of adult based cartoons. In the sense, I know you could say South Park's been one for years, but you look at something more recently, like it's a complete tailspin, but something like Rick and Morty, the Harley Quinn show, those are cartoons behind like undress it as much as you want. They are cartoons, but they're so adult themed and sort of pushing that boundary.
I mean, we can even step forward and like shows like Young Justice are towing the line. Like it started off very much a kids show, I think. But I mean, the most recent series, some of the stuff that happens in that's not appropriate viewing for children like that.
It's not an action figure sort of
you don't see someone get their entire skull button out and think, yeah, that's what I want my kid watching on like Saturday morning with their bowl of cereal, you know?
Yeah. It's. I think those lines are blurring, and at the same time, the audience is getting older. So that audience that was watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
they're still watching Teenage Mutant.
They're still watching it, but they're watching, the Robot Chicken version, or they're watching Harley Quinn show and stuff. So yeah, I think there's an audience shift as well. I feel like I had something else I was going to say, but
something profound, I imagine. Something that you'll remember moments after the episode's ended.
Something that would echo across time and space, like everyone.
It's going to be the single most the single greatest piece of wisdom ever delivered by a human, ever spoken from human lips.
Change the industry forever.
And you're not going to record it, and we're both going to forget about it.
Absolutely. But you could let us know what your thoughts are so far. Again, leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. Is there anything more? I think, as a conclusion, I think, again, East is influencing the West. And like you said, I think the West is influencing the East in little ways. And I think it's from the better for everyone.
I think that once everyone kind of acknowledges that this is an accepted form of media, it's a valid and good point of media, and it's something that everyone can enjoy no matter the age. I think that as those walls are breaking down and people are becoming more accepting of the fact that cartoons can be for adults, I think that both industries are going to benefit. And I think that all forms of, I think it opens up the windows in in live action media as well, when you can kind of blur the lines, you can kind of mix media, you can have scenes that are animated, you can have like an episode of a sitcom that is entirely a cartoon, you know? It's kind of like it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
I think the bottom line is that Western cartoons are telling better stories now using methods by the East, and that's what's making people check out these cartoons. Again, one example I just thought of, which is the Clone Wars series. Again, a bit like Young Justice. It started off as a Saturday morning, based on a toy line sort of premise, but then it grows. It grows with its audience for 6-7 years. So yeah, I think more people will check it out if more people will say, actually, this is a great story. It's not just gimmicky plugs for figures.
There's big titty anime girls. That's the stigma, isn't it? That's the stigma behind it.
That's the trope. Like as soon as we'll be getting, wow, you say that. I saw a TikTok about Catwoman.
Which basically saying that Catwoman is the big titty anime girl. She's the equivalent.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of yeah. I can't even. When we get a lot more high school based cartoons, I think that's when the line is crossed.
That is when the line is crossed. Well, a great combo, that's for sure. I do find that I may have come into this thinking, hey, let's talk about this subject, but as I want to do, we probably talked about maybe 8 or 9 different subjects within that subject.
Which makes it great conversation.
But, yeah, and what's the point of your mate having a podcast if you can't derail it?
At least you're not demonetizing it yet.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. Once we get a third co-host, that's when
have to up the ante.
That's when guidelines will have to be placed. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you are watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know every time a new episode goes live. If you are listening to this on your favorite podcast platform like Apple, Google, or Spotify, be sure to leave a star rating. Again, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe also. Any final words from you, Mr. Susude?
Stay turned.
Stay turned, did you say?
Stay turned.
Relevant links will be in the description down below. If you want to follow us on our social medias, again, they'll be available. Thank you again, and hope to catch you on the next one.